The Morrigan is a deity from Irish mythology. Her name translates as Great Queen or Phantom Queen. The Morrigan is mainly associated with war and fate, especially with foretelling doom, death, or victory in battle. In this role she often appears as a crow, the Bibe. The Morrigan has an association with war and the outcomes of war. She incites warriors to battle and can help bring about victory over their enemies. The Morrigan empowers and encourages warriors to do brave deeds, whilst striking fear into their enemies. She is depicted washing the blood-stained clothes as a foretelling of soldiers that are fated to die. As a war goddess she is not a murderous one, just one that reigns over battles. She is most frequently seen as a goddess of battle and war and has also been seen as a manifestation of the earth goddess in the role of guardian of a territory and its people. The Morrigan is often described as a trio of individuals, all sisters, called the Three Morrigan. The names of the triad of sisters are different depending on the region. The three personas of the Morrigan are usually thought to be as follows. As Bibe, or Battle Crow, she is both seen as a maiden and a crone aspect of the goddess. As Matcha she is a sun goddess who is connected with sovereignty and has a form as a horse. And as Anu, she is a goddess of fertility. The Morrigan has also been described as the envious wife of the Dagda god of life and death, of seasons, agriculture, fertility, magic, and druidry as well. Her sisters are said to be the wives of Night. He was uncle to the Dagda and was a god of war and livestock. The Morrigan is often seen as the first banshee of Irish folklore. Banshees are fairy women who scream to signal the death of people in the family which they protect. In Ireland there was a belief that each family had their own banshee. They would wail when one of the family members was about to perish. The Morrigan and banshees as figures of evil with murderous intent. Banshees are not to be feared as they will warn you of impending doom. Much like the Morrigan warning soldiers of their ill fate. The Morrigan's earliest narrative appearances, in which she is depicted as an individual person and not with her sisters, are in stories of the Ulster cycle, where she has a relationship with the hero Cuchulainn. The hero encounters the Morrigan, but does not recognize her, as she drives a heifer from his territory. In response to this perceived challenge, and his ignorance of her role as a deity figure, he insults her. But before he can attack her she becomes a crow on a nearby branch. Cuchulainn now recognizes her, and tells her that had he known before, he would not have insulted her. She notes that whatever he had done would have brought him ill luck. To his response that she cannot harm him, she delivers a series of warnings, foretelling a coming battle in which he will be killed. In the Toynbee Qualanage, Queen Medb of Connacht launches an invasion of Ulster to steal the bull Don Qualanage. The Morrigan, like Alecto of the Greek Furies, appears to the bull in the form of a crow and warns him to flee. Cuchulainn defends Ulster by fighting a series of single combat at fords against Medb's champions. In between the combat, the Morrigan appears to him as a young woman and offers him her love and her aid in the battle, but he rejects her offer. In response, she intervenes in his next combat, first in the form of an eel who trips him, then as a wolf who stampedes cattle across the ford, and finally as a white, red-eared heifer leading the stampede, just as she had warned in their previous encounter. However, Cuchulainn wounds her in each form and defeats his opponent despite her interference. Later, she appears to him as an old woman bearing the same 3 wounds that her animal forms had sustained, milking a cow. She gives Cuchulainn 3 drinks of milk. He blesses her with each drink, and her wounds are healed. He regrets blessing her for the 3 drinks of milk. She gave him milk from the 3rd teat, and her leg was healed. "You told me once," she said, "that you would never heal me." "Had I known it was you," said Cuchulainn, "I never would have." In one version of Cuchulainn's death tale, as Cuchulainn rides to meet his enemies, he encounters the Morrigan as an old hag washing his bloody armor. This was an omen of his death. Later in the story, mortally wounded, Cuchulainn ties himself to a standing stone with his own entrails so he can die upright, and it is only when a crow lands on his shoulder that his enemies believe he is dead. The Morrigan also appears in texts of the mythological cycle. In the 12th century book of the Taking of Ireland, she is listed among as one of the daughters of Ernmas, the Irish mother goddess, granddaughter of Nuada, an Irish god associated with hunting and fishing. In one story, as battle is about to be joined, the leader, Lug, asks each what power they bring to the battle. The Morrigan's reply is difficult to interpret, but involves pursuing, destroying and subduing. When she comes to the battlefield, she chants a poem, and immediately the battle breaks and the Fomorians are driven into the sea. After the battle, she chants another poem celebrating the victory and prophesying the end of the world. In another story, she lures away the bull of a woman named Odres. Odres then follows the Morrigan to the otherworld, via the cave of Cruachan, which is said to be her fit abode. When Odres falls asleep, the Morrigan turns her into a pool of water that feeds into the river Shannon. In this story, the Morrigan is called the Dagda's envious queen, fierce of mood. She is also called a shapeshifter and a cunning ravencaller whose pleasure was in mustard hosts. The Morrigan is often considered a triple goddess, but this triple nature is vague and inconsistent. These triple appearances are partially due to the Celtic significance of threeness. It is thought that maybe this is in reference to three personalities instead of three different deities. The Morrigan is mainly associated with war and fate, and is often interpreted as a war goddess. Her role often involves premonitions of a particular warrior's violent death, suggesting a link with the banshee of later folklore. Her role was to not only be a symbol of imminent death, but to also influence the outcome of war. Most often, she did this by appearing as a crow flying overhead, and would either inspire fear or courage in the hearts of the warriors. In some cases, she is written to have appeared in visions to those who are destined to die in battle as washing their bloody armor. In this specific role, she is also given the role of foretelling imminent death with a particular emphasis on the individual. There are also a few rare accounts where she would join in the battle itself as a warrior and show her favoritism in a more direct manner. The Morrigan is also associated with the land and animals, particularly livestock. She oversees the land, its stock and its society. Her shape-shifting is an expression of her affinity with the whole living universe. The goddess in Ireland is primarily concerned with the prosperity of the land, its fertility, its animal life, and its security against external forces. The welfare and fertility of a people depend on their security against external aggression, and warlike action can thus have a protective aspect. She can be interpreted as providing political or military aid, or protection to the king while acting as a goddess of sovereignty, instead of only being a goddess of war. She was closely linked to the Fianna. There is evidence to suggest that these groups may have been in some way dedicated to her. Fianna were small warrior hunter bands in Gaelic Ireland during the Iron Age and early Middle Ages. A Fiann was made up of freeborn young males, often aristocrats, who had not inherited any money from their father yet. It was a type of rite of passage for young men. They lived in the wild, hunting, raiding other communities and lands, training, and fighting as mercenaries. Her worship may have resembled that of Perchta groups in Germanic areas. Perchta was a goddess in Alpine paganism. The Morrigan is remembered at sites around Ireland which are named after her. In County Tipperary, there is a Folachta Fia called Folachtna Mor Riogna, which means the cooking pit of the Morrigan, and in County Meath there are two hills known as Dachichna Morrinya, or the breasts of the Morrigan. Morgan Le Fay can be seen as an Arthurian take on the Irish Celtic goddess the Morrigan. The Morrigan is a death goddess and a war goddess. Morgan Le Fay has a name obviously derived from this Irish war goddess. Morgan Le Fay is Arthur's half-sister, the daughter of Arthur's mother Igraine and her first husband, the Duke of Cornwall. She is also presented as an adversary of Arthur. She gives Excalibur to her lover Accolone so he can use it against King Arthur and, when that plot fails, she steals the scabbard of Excalibur, which protects Arthur, and throws it into a lake. In the Vita Merlini, circa 1150, Morgan is said to be the first of 9 sisters who rule the Fortunate Isle, or the Isle of Apples, and is presented as a healer as well as a shapeshifter.